to our panel, and I see my panelists running for their chairs because we're all about talking in this group, aren't we? Now, I've always said there's two wonderful things that go on at CNP. What happens on the stage and what happens in the hallways. And they're both equally important as we get to know each other and find allies in the battle and discuss the issues we're interested in. So I love all the chatter. So I'm Rebecca Hagelin, and this is our panel that we are continuing. If you missed the general session on the women's issues, this one is called Winning Women. And it's not that we're going to focus on the election so much, but what we want to do is give you a broad understanding of some of the issues we talked about that will be key and center, not just now, but forever in the country, as the history has shown us. And then we are going to go into some election-oriented conversation, but what you're also going to have access to is, Kristan will tell you more about this later, but Kristan is going to be finishing up a $450,000 messaging research program. And she's going to make that available to all of you as soon as it's complete, and you'll have the latest messaging, intel, and data about how to talk about a lot of these issues, and abortion in particular. So first we have to do a little bit of house cleaning, and then I will introduce our guests. These are the legal requirements that I have to read to you. So this is an event sponsored by CNP Action, Inc. So forgive me for reading, but I'm going to so I don't get in trouble later. This session is sponsored by CNP Action, Inc., the 501c4 sister organization of the Council for National Policy. CNP Action, Inc. serves as an advocate for conservative principles such as limited government, the promotion of free economic enterprise, traditional values, and a strong national defense. CNP Action, Inc. does not support candidates or political parties, but it may promote issues or specific pieces of legislation. Contributions to CNP Action, Inc. are not tax deductible as charitable contributions, but they are welcome. For more information on CNP Action, Inc. and how you can support our efforts, please review the information in your meeting packet. Thanks to those who have donated to CNP Action, Inc. since our last meeting in October. There's a slide right there, and we want to recognize the people who are making all this possible. Also in your packet is the Rules of Engagement document. Please familiarize yourself with this document. If you have a comment or a question, please try to keep it concise to 1 minute. We're going to put the document on the slide. Everybody just take a moment to read that. The goal of the action session is to strategize on a given issue and arrive at a unified path of action to be taken by all present in an effort to maximize our impact. When there's only 15 minutes left in this action session, a loud buzzer will sound, which means it's time to focus on creating a final list of our action steps. You will be instructed to go to a website and vote for your top 3 action steps while live in this room. Okay? So now I'd like to introduce our panel. We have a wonderful authority on the law on many of the discussions we had in our general session. And Greg was not able to be at our general session because our stage was full of female conservative The View participants. But he's graciously decided to be here. And we're the women who love men. So we're so happy to have you here with us, Greg. Greg serves as senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, where he's the director of the Center for Religious Schools and senior counsel for the Center for Legislative Advocacy. He regularly comments on TV and radio about cases, has written for the New York Times and Christianity Today, and he is a Duke University School of Law graduate. And
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Told we won't talk about basketball because I don't know anything about it. But We're very glad that you're here, Greg, and we really appreciate your joining us. And as soon as I introduce the other panelists, we're going to start with Greg, since you haven't heard from him yet. Just to reintroduce my dear friend Cori. Anne is not only the daughter of Phyllis Schlafly, but she has been carrying her mantle forward into the next generation and beyond as the chairman of Eagle Forum, and she's been on that board of directors for 10 years. She used to have a radio show, which I hope she gets one again after the session we've done today. And it was a weekly call-in show on a lot of these issues run across the BOT radio network. Next to her is Kristan Hawkins, who's the president of Students for Life, mommy extraordinaire of some very young children. And she's really taken this what was a small organization of Students for Life and spread it across all 50 states, educating the next generation on pro-life issues, and also, I would say, giving us back intel on what she's hearing on the college campuses. So she always has good news to share about that. Again, next to Kristan is Hadley Heath Manning. She's the Director of Policy at the Independent Women's Forum and Independent Women's Voice. She's also a Senior Fellow at the Steamboat Institute. She's testified before Congress and state legislators. You've also seen her on television. And she's a guest with us today, and as is Greg, and we're so grateful to have both of you at the CNP family meeting. And then on the very end is my good co-conspirator in crime, Penny Nance, who's the president and CEO of Concerned Women for America. And she also serves as the president of CWA's Legislative Action Committee and their Political Action Committee. So she wears lots of hats. She's incredibly knowledgeable and does an incredibly effective job. So please help me welcome all of our panelists. I want to give a special thanks to my colleagues at United in Purpose for continuing to be our note takers, and a special thanks to Anna. She's done a superb job at doing this in past workshops, and so thank you, Anna, for your time and attention today. She's what makes it possible to assimilate all of our discussion and put into a usable format. So we're going to just summarize. I'll just summarize very briefly what we're seeking to achieve today. It's continuing the discussion we started on the stage. There are a lot of issues we didn't get to touch on, many we didn't get to dig down deep in. We could actually have several days just on these topics because they're so numerous but all related. And I think the way I see them as related is the satanic attack on the family and who God is. In Genesis, God created them male and female. In Genesis, he told them to unify for life and to produce the next and the future generations. It was Genesis that defined who we are as men and women. And so naturally, Satan would go after those two things. Our sexual identity of who we are made in God's image as male and female, and our ability to procreate. This is why I think you see the LGBTQ, XYZ, alphabet soup people always linking arms with the abortion activists. Right. You cannot separate abortion from human sexuality or human sexuality from abortion. And they're both designed by the enemy to destroy an understanding of who God is and to destroy this wonderful, holy gift that God gave us to be co-creators with him of human life. So they are bound together for all time. And that's why I think these are the two center issues that affect everything else that goes on. The number one cause of poverty in America is what? Single motherhood, right? The number one killer of children in the country is what? Abortion. Everything goes back to these two issues. So we're going to explore that today. I've heard it said by Peter Jones, who's an amazing theologian. He runs a site called Truth Exchange with an X, and he goes into all of the theology and biblical truths about the satanic effect. And I've been to his seminars, and the one sentence he said that really sticks with me and explains this all homosexuality is, homosexuality is the physical manifestation of paganism. Let me say that one more time. Homosexuality is the physical manifestation of paganism because it's man saying, we're God, we decide. There is no God with distinct differences and distinct attributes from us. It's all about Romans chapter 1, which I'll go into at the end as well, that I think summarizes our spiritual battle. So it's just kind of an overview, and then we get into the legislative things and the ERA again. But Greg, thank you for joining us, and I know that you're going to center in on the Equality Act, which is a real hot issue right now that we all need to be aware of. So
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, I feel like we should play the game, which one of these things is not like the other? But in all seriousness, I'm really delighted to be invited to participate in this panel and to come to CNP and participate in the CNP Action Panel. It's really a great honor and privilege to share this dais, I guess, with the rest of you. You're all wonderful. So my primary task is to talk about the Equality Act, which I would like to think of as being the way that everything you just described theologically becomes compulsory under the law. No dissent brooked at all. But I'm going to take one step back and put the Equality Act in a somewhat broader context. The Equality Act is really just an illustration, a manifestation, an example of a broader phenomenon, which are laws that ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Laws that ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. To save a few syllables and a few seconds, I'm going to abbreviate those as SOGIs, S-O-G-I, sexual orientation, gender identity. The Equality Act is certainly not the first time that a SOGI has been proposed. They've been proposed really since the 1970s, and in earnest they started becoming realities, at least in states and localities, in the 1990s. And really, since the early 2000s, there's been a concerted and consistent effort to try to add SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity, to a federal civil rights law. So eventually I'll talk about the Equality Act and say sort of what it would do, what is its current status, what are its prospects for passage, what should we do to try to prevent it, and what should we do if it does become law. But I'm going to talk about some of the existing problems that we have right now that tell us what will happen on a broader scale if the Equality Act becomes law. You've heard some of these examples already here at this conference and at the earlier session, but laws that ban SOGI discrimination in state law are an enormous problem already. You have, depending on how you count, 21 or 22 states have already put SOGI in their laws that ban discrimination in various contexts, whether it's places of public accommodation, employment, public schools, housing, things of that nature. And we've already seen the impacts on religious liberty and the interests of women and girls in particular. Businesses. ADF has had the pleasure of representing Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop. I'm sure you're quite familiar with that case that made it all the way to the Supreme Court, where he prevailed on relatively narrow grounds, but he still prevailed and established a foundation for setting even better precedents that protect us from these laws. But why was Jack in court in the first place? It wasn't because there was some federal law that banned SOGI discrimination. It was because of a state law that said if you run a public accommodation, a place of public accommodation, a business, thou shalt not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation in his case. Now, Jack, of course, didn't turn people away because they identify as LGBTQ. He simply refuses to create certain messages. And our first argument was, hey, he's not committing sexual orientation discrimination. If you identify as homosexual or you're gender dysphoric, he's going to sell you a cake, he's going to sell you some cookies. He's just not create custom art for a same-sex wedding ceremony that goes against his religious convictions. But they rejected that argument. They said, you are committing discrimination. So if we have sexual orientation at the federal level, we'll have that phenomenon all over the country, and we'll have a very broad understanding of what it means to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. Another example, ADF represents the Downtown Hope Center in Anchorage, Alaska. There was a reference to this situation in the earlier panel. The Downtown Hope Center is for women. It's most of whom who have been victims of domestic violence, sex trafficking, sexual abuse. This place is a haven for women. There was a man who identifies as a woman who shows up in the middle of the night, intoxicated, bleeding, demanding to be admitted to this women's shelter, even though he's a man. They politely turned him away. They offered to get him a cab, to take him to the hospital to address his physical injuries, to get him taken care of. He didn't accept that. He repaid their kindness with a lawsuit. And what was the lawsuit? It was a claim that this downtown's women's shelter had discriminated against him on the basis of his gender identity in the context of places of public accommodation. Now, they eventually prevailed in that, but the process was the punishment, as it often is, and we are concerned that that might happen again. Another example, Maryland has essentially a school choice program, and they permitted religious schools to participate in it for decades in some of these programs. But then SOGI comes in. The Maryland legislature says, you know what? We don't like it that religious schools with these archaic views about sexuality and the distinction between the sexes are getting public money. What a travesty. So they stick on to their eligibility requirement, thou shalt not discriminate in admissions on the basis of sexual orientation. And out they go. Even worse, the state of Maryland says, oh, you know what money we gave you the last 2 years? Give it back. $100,000 check that they needed to write. So ADF represents them in a lawsuit not only to prevent the state from trying to get that money back, but also from getting back into the program so they can compete on a level playing field with the other private schools that participate in the program. Women's sports, wow. So you've probably heard the story of Selena Sewell and her compatriots who are fighting against the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Association. They decided that they will not discriminate. They will not allow schools to discriminate on the basis of gender identity. Well, what does that translate into? What does that mean? Are there really schools telling trans kids they can't participate in sports at all? No, that's not what is happening. What is happening is schools were, prior to their rules, saying if you're a boy, you're going to be in boy sports. And if you're a girl, you're going to be in a girl sports. And there are good reasons for that, right? We don't even go into it. You all understand that. But they said, that's discriminatory. You're discriminating on the basis of gender identity if you won't allow a male to participate in women's sports. So that's what they did. What happened? Predictably, these two boys who identified as girls dominated the track events that they participated in. Friends on the other side of this issue say, yeah, but they got a chance to compete. Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough, frankly. They compete to win. They trained hard to win. They trained to have opportunities. They knew who was going to be in the audience at that event, scouts from schools who will offer them scholarships if they do well enough. If they compete and win, they go on to the next level and have an even better chance of going to college and being an intercollegiate athlete. So these girls are suffering because of this gender identity agenda, and ADF represents them and has filed a lawsuit. We've also heard about the threats to privacy and safety that occur when entities ban gender identity discrimination. This is a real problem. This is not made up. This is real. There's documented evidence of men who identify as women taking advantage of the looseness of the rules surrounding private spaces to videotape women in private spaces. We represent a client, a woman named Pasha Thomas, whose daughter attended a public school in Decatur, Georgia. That school had a policy that said, you know what, we're not going to discriminate against transgender people. Translation, we're going to allow boys to use the girls' restrooms. Gender fluid boy goes into the girls' restroom and sexually assaults our client's 5-year-old daughter. This is what happens when you put gender identity in non-discrimination law. Other things, even kind of more far afield examples of what gender identity laws do. Pronouns. I suspect most of you in the room think the pronoun thing is weird, right? Like, why do I have to use this? What about these made-up pronouns? What about calling a singular person they, all of that? Well, it's weird, but what if it's mandatory? What if it's legally mandatory? That's how gender identity non-discrimination rules get interpreted, to make that legally mandatory. ADF represents a former teacher in the Richmond area public school, Peter Vlaming, who did not go along with the directive that he use preferred pronouns of transgender students. Now, he didn't want to make life difficult for this person who was in his class. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful. So he proposed what I thought was a reasonable solution. I won't use pronouns at all. I'll just refer to people by their names. That wasn't good enough. That was not good enough. You have to go along with the program. So he got fired, and we represent him in his case. Also, remember a few years ago when the Obama administration says, oh, by the way, everybody except churches, you got to put abortifacients in your health plans. Outrage over that. We were fortunate enough to represent a number of clients and win in the Supreme Court on this issue. What do transgender non-discrimination mandates require? To include in your health plans sex reassignment. And what does that amount to? What does that constitute? Injecting 10-year-olds with puberty blockers. Horrific. Child abuse, in my judgment. Cross-sex hormones, teenagers. Sex reassignment surgery. So the Equality Act would take all of those things and make them mandatory nationwide. I'm just going to wrap up by saying, what are its prospects? Well, it didn't go anywhere. It passed the House. We know that, right? It passed the House by an overwhelming majority. Every Democrat that voted, 8 Republicans voted in favor of it. 8 Republicans voted in favor of it. 1 in the Senate, no vote yet in the Senate. There probably won't be any movement on it in the Senate, because, frankly, because Republicans control the Senate. We had 1, Susan Collins, as a co-sponsor of the Equality Act, but it's not going there. So people say to me, well, Greg, what if, there's a sweep in November? What if there's a Democratic president, Democratic Senate, Democratic House? Are we going to have the Equality Act? I say maybe, and the only reason I say maybe is because there still is a filibuster in the Senate. You still need 60 votes to pass stuff. But as you all well know, there's been a lot of discussion among Democrats of getting rid of the legislative filibuster. Mm-hmm. So we could be facing that prospect come November and in the aftermath. Now, I do have some action steps. We're going to save those for a little bit later on, but I appreciate your attention on my part of our discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for being brave and being up here with us, too.
Can I ask Greg a question?
Sure.
What about free speech?
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't free speech trump the Equality Act?
Well, it certainly should, and we will undoubtedly be arguing that if the Equality Act becomes law. It violates free speech, it violates freedom of religion, it violates the privacy interests of women. Jack Phillips, our client, how did we win?
Free speech.
Free speech, you got it.
Yep.
So, yes, it violates. Do the supporters of the Equality Act care? No, they don't care. They don't care. They think Jack should lose.
And do you have thoughts from the panel that you didn't get to say that you want to kind of summarize right here? We're going to give each of our women 5 minutes, and then we'll go into open discussion that includes you as well.
Sure. In the break, a couple people said to me, I don't understand why we're talking about this. Isn't this just ancient history? And it is ancient history. The problem is that anybody younger than I am, except for Kristan, doesn't understand what's going on. And because they didn't fight this battle in the 1970s and so the issues aren't there. But what I found when we fought in Illinois is that we lost Republican men. I mean, you said 8 supported the Equality Act because the Republican men are spineless in the face of Democratic women. And the Republican men don't want to be seen as anti-woman, and so they are afraid to stand up for us on these issues. And what I think, that we as women need to do is support our male legislators so that they don't feel as though that they're making an anti-woman choice by sensibly voting on these issues. I mean, what I did find in Illinois several years ago is that because we have a lot of Democratic Catholic women in the southern part of the state, they voted against ERA. They had no problem voting no on ERA, but it was the Republican men who didn't. So that is the key thing to, and of course there were some Republican men who voted for ERA in the House, the U.S. House of Representatives, when it passed the other week. So we need to get our own caucus in order to explain to these male legislators exactly what's going on.
Yeah, Kristan?
Yeah, I think that should be an action item, like don't elect spineless male Republicans.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I was looking around the room, everyone was like, yeah.
When we get to that part, if you want to add that, we will, and we'll vote on it.
Write that down for myself. So yeah, I'll put this.
Or rent your
We're still on opening statements. We'll get to that next.
Spineless men. Okay, got it. Yeah, so I went over the talking points. I think if you're still not aware of why we need to be fighting and talking about the ERA, then you can come and talk to Ann and I all day long about this. And there's been numerous articles written about the ERA. I mean, the left is paying attention to this. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was asked about the ERA at Georgetown University the week of the vote. Now, RGB, their great feminist icon, has even said that it's dead and they should start over. So they may start over if they feel like they can do it. And if they have enough, they feel like they can kind of push men, Republican men, into voting for this. Ellie Schmiel, 2 years ago in the Daily Beast, when she was asked why she was pushing this dead amendment, she kind of used the Saul Alinsky, tactic. This is what you push, and then when women find out they are not equal and there's no ERA, there's going to be a groundswell of women who push it, and then instantly it's going to happen. It's going to be this snowball effect. And so they know what they're doing. And it's very tactical and strategic for them. And I think we shouldn't just discount this simply because it's dead and we know what the law says. They don't care what the law says. I mean, I think we need to get that through our heads. Like, they will blow up the system in order to create a new system, and that's okay with them because in their worldview, that's how they're creating a just and fair society. And they're okay with that. And we just think differently. We're like, no, that's what the rule of law, the National Archives said. No. They don't care. That's not going to stop them. So things that we didn't say that we can add to this discussion. We kind of hit, about this when we're talking about gender and these SOGI laws. And I think Heritage Foundation, as well as ADS, has done a lot of work. Emily Cow at the Heritage Foundation, she is just a plethora of knowledge. It's CAO. You should look her up. She's written about it and speaking about it. The two most controversial things I say on a college campus, on my speaking tours, and they all come to protest because I say make abortion illegal and it looks like MAGA, so they get mad. But they don't get mad when I start talking about how abortion hurts women, how we should re-envision a society that supports women in the workplace, in school, so no woman ever feels like she has to choose again between the life of her child and her education or career. They all have to nod their heads and agree in these common sense things. What incites them is when I say that there are two genders and that only women can give birth. That makes them very angry. It's very triggering because I'm not, using the correct pronouns when I say helping her. That's triggering because I'm non-binary, and then I have to say, well, excuse me, do you have a womb? And if you have a womb, you are a her, and that gets very, touchy. But the other thing that was, and that, we kind of expect the gender fight. What's been interesting is, in one of my presentations I've been saying is, we need to be promoting responsible decision-making as parents, as a society. And when two heterosexuals engage in sexual activity, you are consenting to the fact that you may create a unique, whole, living human being with unrepeatable DNA. And that just sets them off. We have separated reproduction from sex, and it is like brand new information that I am presenting to them.
Yes.
And we laugh, and I do find it funny, but it's a challenge, folks, because we need to be talking about this. Every decision you make, every action you take has consequences, and sex has interesting ones.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's creating a new human person. And it's very simple, but that is the most controversial thing I am saying on campuses, which tells us we have a major problem. All right, the talking points, talking about the election. Late-term abortion is a winning issue for Republicans. So for a long time, we've been hearing that, abortion, it's part of the three-stool social issues, but then all the consultants in D.C. tell the candidates to stay away. We have polling data. Susan B. Anthony List has been working on this. I'm sure CWA has some of this. The campaign has it. We know it because Trump has been saying it. Late-term abortion is a winning issue with white, upper-class, suburban women, which is a demographic that conservatives need to bring back into the fold. States like New Mexico is the late-term abortion capital of the world. Women from all over the world fly to Albuquerque to, instead of deliver their baby, abort their baby in the 7th, 8th, or 9th month. And the university has a direct relationship with that late-term abortion facility. New Mexico, friends, is a very important state for us this year, so I would keep that in mind. The other thing I will talk about just quickly, we are engaging this mushy middle millennial research study. Quite frankly, it's just because I want to be able to convert more people faster and cheaper. And so that's why we're engaging this, is how do we do this online? Because our conversions on campuses can take 5 to 30 minutes. And what's been interesting in the interviews, the 2-hour-long qualitative interviews that we conducted before we went into our qualitative phase, and things you're not going to like to hear, but Republican brand is very bad. Republicans are white old bigots who don't like people, especially people with brown skin. Pro-life is also a bad brand. It's slightly better than GOP, but not that great. And even though they don't like abortion and they feel icky about abortion in their gut, they're not going to identify with a pro-life label or vote or really identify with a pro-life candidate because they don't want to be associated with that. And this is part of the moral relativism challenge we have with my generation of, choosing any side is considered extremism and is considered a moral wrong. The researchers who put together the phase 1 report actually called it choosing the middle, that the most profound thing they saw in all of the research we did in the first phase of this study was that we always assume that women and others find themselves in the middle on these issues, but they actually make a conscious choice to choose a middle. At the end of every 2-hour-long interview, we gave them a spectrum of abortion whenever, wherever, taxpayer-funded, abortion never, under any circumstances. And we said, just put an X where you are on this chart. And the women were precise. Is this X right in the middle? Can you tell me, does this look right in the middle? And so I think that's a shift in our thinking that they're choosing to be in the middle. So we can talk.
They don't want to offend anyone.
They don't want to offend. So we'll send you all the research. We can talk about that later. So there's lots to go.
So Hadley, you have 5 minutes as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Well, with my 5 extra minutes, I thought I'd explain a little bit more about Independent Women's Forum, Independent Women's Voice, and what we're doing. And I think this fits in nicely with our theme of winning women. Independent Women's Forum is about 27 years old. Our mission is to advance policies that aren't just well-intended, but actually enhance people's freedom, choices, and opportunities. We are a 501c3. Much like there's CNP and CNP Action, there's Independent Women's Voice, which is a 501c4 organization which puts our ideas and our educational advocacy work from IWF into action. And lastly, and most recently, I was telling Greg about this. In 2019, we launched Independent Women's Law Center. And so we will be filing amicus briefs, I'm sure, supporting many of the things that Greg and ADF are doing. I thought I liked Greg, and then I found out he went to Duke, and I'm a Carolina person, so now we've got beef. But I think I can get over that in order to work for the better, higher good. So I want to share a little bit more about what we're actually doing at our organizations. Our motto is all issues are women's issues. Yeah. We are not a single issue organization. We take positions. I'm our director of policy. We take positions across a wide variety of issue areas and work, as our mission statement says, for greater opportunities, prosperity, choices for women, families, and that includes men. So we have worked on a couple of what we call communication kits in the last year on topics as wide and various as gun policy, immigration, healthcare, because we think it's important to talk to women specifically about these issues using a tone and a brand and a message that is customized for women, because women, we recognize that they're inherently different from men. We think differently. We approach issues differently. And so why not communicate differently with this subset of, I guess I can say voters since we're in the CNP action session. Healthcare was the #1 issue in the 2018 midterm elections. We believe healthcare will be the #1 issue again in 2020. And as I mentioned in our panel earlier, the left has a very strong brand in part because they have a policy-making and election strategy of picking a problem in society, whether it's people without health insurance or people without access to paid family medical leave or people who are facing dire poverty for whatever reason. And then typically, their strategy is to exacerbate the scope of the problem, get the facts wrong about the nature of the problem, and then prescribe their solution. And of course, if you don't have the problem right, your solution's not going to fit very well. And then that puts conservatives in the position of saying, we're against your solution. And unfortunately, what a lot of women get from that narrative is that conservatives don't care about the problem. Mm-hmm. If we oppose their solution, we must not care about the problem. Mm-hmm. And so our mission has to be talking about the problems in our society in a way that is accurate, that demonstrates our concern and care, because people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Mm-hmm. And that's part of our approach. That's part of our tone. We are going to be talking about healthcare as the 2020 election approaches, but we also believe that people don't just vote based on issues, right? They vote because of that brand. And I can tell you as a young mother that there's enormous social pressure to be liberal. If you are a young mother or if you're a college student, enormous social pressure that when you and your girlfriends go to Starbucks or you're on soccer pickup duty, the things that people are talking about, it's very acceptable and very cool to talk about, oh, we're going to the Women's March next month or something like that. But if you start talking about your beliefs or your worldview as a conservative in a place like Denver, where I live, it's really not cool. It's really, the brand is not good. The brand is not cool. And so we have to change that. We have to make it more acceptable, and we have to make it more mainstream. We have to remind Americans that there are, half of women who don't identify as progressive, at least half of women. And when we talk about the women's vote, because we're in 2020, that's 100 years. We're celebrating 100 years of the 19th Amendment this August. Yep. We're really talking about women's votes, because there's not a monolithic women's vote. And there are many women out there who can agree with us. We like to talk about sinners, saints, savables. Of course, there's sinners, folks we're never going to reach with our message because they're leading the charge on the other side. There's saints, people singing in the choir, most of the people in this room. We get it. We have the same worldview. We're going to vote for candidates who have the right policies and the right approach. And then there's savables. And we have to talk to those people because they truly can, they truly do, I think in many cases, identify with our positions and our worldview. We just have to give them the freedom to say so.
Great, thank you. And so Penny has a few remarks, and she also has a very short video to show us about this.
Hold that. I just
after her remarks.
Yeah, let me first start out by saying I love that you sort of introduced, in case you don't know who we are, Concerned Women for America is the nation's largest public policy women's organization. We've been around since 1979. We have about 400 adult chapters, about 38, 40, I don't know, it changes daily. I think we're up to 40 Young Women for America college chapters. And I wanted to introduce Dr. Shay Garrison, if you want to stand up real quick. She has written Counterpoint, and we ran out on the Equality Act. We have lots of information, so touch base with her if you need more information, and also our lesson on socialism that I referenced earlier. We're happy to share all of that to you all for free because we want our data out there. It's really important. I promised you all good messaging on Me Too, and I'm going to close with that. But first, I just wanted to touch base on what we were talking about. I loved everything I heard. One thing that is important to note is there is a crack up going on within the left because there are women, many of whom are lesbians, that feel betrayed by this movement of interchangeability. These are women, and by the way, Concerned Women for America has worked in coalition with Women's Liberation Front to fight the Equality Act because they say, we worked hard for Title IX for women's sports. We worked hard for Social Security benefits and other key issues, 800 laws that we all support in protection of women. We actually believe in safe spaces. We are betrayed. And we're the ones that are being pushed out of the movement. And I think that's very instructive. And any airing to their grievances, we should encourage that, because they need to be able to speak into that issue. And you got to think, when you've got Concerned Women for America and the Women's Liberation Front and Phyllis Schlafly's daughter and all of us saying there is a problem with this, that as Americans we should sit up and pay attention. And hopefully, the better angels will prevail on that. I have a story about John McCain, about the idea of interchangeability, that I'll save, and maybe afterwards if you all want to hear about it. But it is, all that to say, it is pervasive. That idea has spread to the upper echelons of our government, to spineless males, I think we've called them, and others who are just
love men.
We're the women's group that actually like men, but they're terrified to push back on that notion. But the key is, as women, we have to lead, just like Phyllis led in the 70s in Beverly LaHaye. This is our moment. And we have to put a stake in the ground and say, absolutely not on my watch. But the issue of Me Too is something that I think is winnable. I think there is solid policy perspectives we can bring. The scandal in Congress, over 20 years, 264 cases, somewhere to the tune of $17 million that the taxpayer paid to cover up the sins of John Conyers and others, unacceptable. And then, of course, the Debbie Smith Act. And by the way, I have my own story. When I was pregnant with my daughter, my first child, I was on a running path in Virginia. I was attacked by a complete stranger. I was physically assaulted, and I was a victim of an attempted rape. A stranger stopped. So all that to say, these are very personal stories, and when we don't lean into the issue and speak truth and show compassion and love, we leave it over to the other side. Let's not give them that. So the Debbie Smith Act is a bill that clears up the backlog of DNA rape kits. There's about 100,000 rape kits. This is a proper role of government, the safety of Americans, and they're being left out there, particularly in underserved communities. So if you want to just roll the video, I think this is some ideas of how you can talk about the issue, hopefully. I'm coming at this as a woman who has been a victim of an attempted rape and a physical assault when I was pregnant with my first child in a running path in Virginia. I have written a whole chapter in my book about that issue. I've testified before Congress advocating for women and victims of sexual violence, advocating for the Debbie Smith Act, and written numerous, op-eds about this. This is an important issue to my heart.
I also want to thank Penny Nance of Concerned Women of America, who testified at my invitation.
But I care about justice. And that's the missing piece here. We do believe that a person is innocent until proven guilty in this case.
She, like me, wants to ensure rape victims remain the top priority under the program. Changes suggested by her organization have now been incorporated into this reauthorization bill.
I would like to believe that women are always morally superior to men as the head of Concerned Women for America. Right. But the Duke Lacrosse case and Lena Dunham's book, and even going back to classic literature, To Kill a Mockingbird, we know that's not always true because we are broken people. The best that we can do is try to get to the truth.
And you're saying that not every woman always tells the truth in every instance.
Sadly, that is the case. Of course it is. And we know that you don't immediately become more moral because you're a woman. That's why justice must be blind.
We weaponize and politicize an important issue like rape. We degrade every victim in this country, and it has to stop.
Concerned Women for America members sent thousands of petitions asking Congress to tell us. Over 20 years, 264 cases, $15 million of our money was paid out to hide what members of Congress did. And these weren't little allegations. These were big things. We're 1 year later, Martha, and we still do not know which members used approximately $17 million of the taxpayer funds. There's 264 cases, and we don't know who they were. And we believe at Concerned Women for America that the taxpayer has a right to know. We want to know who we covered up for, and there needs to be restitution. The new bill does make some improvements, and going forward requires restitution, but it's not clear whether or not even then we'll know for sure going forward who actually actually is the perpetrator. Because in the new legislation, you just disclose the office. It could be the chief of staff, it could be the ledge director, it could be the press secretary, and like they're going to write out their boss.
Or it could be the member.
It could be the member, and that's the point. We've got to have more transparency, and we're not going to let this go.
You will keep pushing.
I will keep pushing, I promise.
Wow.
And yet we still don't know.
We don't know.
So I
we
have
still
a
don't
feeling
know.
that all the women here are going to keep pushing on everything. So I don't know exactly. We are supposed to be in Q&A now. Is that right? We have microphones. So we're going to bring you guys into our discussion because I know you have a lot of questions. So please keep it to a question and keep it under 1 minute. And raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, please.
Good evening, or good afternoon, and thank you so much to all of you for being here. My name is Janelle Vandenbos, and last night I had a nice talk with Kristan, and I wanted you to tell them what you told me yesterday about your peer-to-peer program and how you're able to move men and women up the scale on college campuses.
Sure.
I didn't plant this question. I did not. That's what you said you had talked to me. I was like, oh no, what did we talk about?
What did I say?
And as you're answering, Kristan, as you're answering, if you could kind of do it in terms of an action step as well, so we can start getting those on screen.
I think we need to be we train students to have conversations on campuses. That's the most valuable thing we can do, we know, to change culture is have one-on-one conversations. And I think there's a lot of pressure on us when we have these conversations with our friends and family members. And I remember when I was a student, I always I have to change their minds from here all the way to here. And the way we train our students, I think this could be helpful, is understanding when you're having these conversations with another person, we do a sliding scale at Students for Life. So we have like a 1 through 6 scale of where someone is. So when they come up to our display, our heart-to-heart display that we're doing right now on campuses, this is something we found in our polling that was kind of hidden. The left has released some polling recently. We also found it hidden. Kaiser, the day of the March for Life, had a poll said, majority of Americans support Roe versus Wade. They oppose state restrictions on abortion. And it was all bad news, except down on page 8, there was a little line of Americans who support restrictions on abortion when fetal heartbeat can be detected. 49%. Fetal heartbeat begins at 3 weeks. Every single abortion in America is committed when there's a fetal heartbeat. So the natural thing for us was, well, maybe we just need to tell people when the fetal heartbeat begins. So we ask a question, and we ask people, when do you think the fetal heart begins? When do you think a baby's heart begins to beat? When did your heart begin to beat? We start from there, and then we educate. And then we say, okay, now, how do you feel about procedures that end the life of that beating heart, that stop that beating heart? Because every single abortion committed in America stops beating heart. Abortionist is not effective unless a heart stops beating. That's how you know success in an abortion. So I would encourage you to think of it as a sliding scale. This is what we instruct our students and staff to do. We quickly assess when someone comes up to us where they're at on that scale. And if you do it a couple of times, you can kind of figure out where they're at by their tone of their voice and how they're looking at you, right? If they are almost in the middle, they might actually be listening and making eye contact. If they're really against you, they've already probably cursed you and called you a bigot before they even got to their question. But then you start thinking of how do you ask a question, how do you get them to respond, and how do you get them to build some sort of common ground with you? Because I think we're getting to what you just said so great. People don't know how much you know until you know how much you care. Great John Maxwell quote. I believe that most of these people we speak with on the campus truly have good intentions. They are trying to end suffering, to ease suffering. They just want to go about it differently, and they don't realize when they have a prescription to end suffering, to make someone else's life better, that they're ending someone else's life. Their hierarchy of rights is disordered, right? Their liberty, the woman's liberty, is higher than a child's life. And we know it's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
So, Kristan, could I ask?
I would try to do it order-wise.
One of our action steps would be, this is a question for you too. Do you guys have that methodology anywhere on your website that we could study and become familiar with? Or Can you please create that methodology for us?
I can write that out. I'll be happy to write that out for
Okay.
you. Also, we do a National Pro-Life Summit with several national organizations, Heritage, ADF, Live Action. I would encourage all of you to come to that. It's the day after the March for Life. It's like $70. Every national pro-life organization will be there. We have a lot of folks in the conservative movement who care about life, who care about ending abortion, but it's its own movement. And there's all kinds of nuances and ways to talk about it.
Okay.
So come to something like that as well.
So we
but
want to
I can
make
write it
sure
out.
that they have your contact information, because I know you have all of that,
Yep,
and then
it's
you
on the
have the
flyer.
research that's coming out as well. There's a handout here, her contact information. It's on all of your chairs. Guys, this is real research. It's proven methodology that you need to use. And who's our next questioner?
Question in terms of national law, especially the things you were talking about. Our work, of course, in elections is we have proven that elections are easy to manipulate, that those who are in positions of power and authority simply change the rules of engagement, basically, and pass the laws that they want to pass without the vote of the people. So we're working hard on that issue, but here, what you're talking about is critical, that we get the message across to women and men across the country about the dangers of these bills coming up. I'm wondering, is there a method that you all are using to maximize that message? Because if we're slow to getting this message out about the dangers, my concern, Congress will pass these laws as fast as they can, and if they can convince the Senate to move it on, then before we can get the word out, it'll be too late.
Okay, so the question I'd like for each one of you to answer in 30 seconds or less is, what are you doing to get the message out that everybody here can participate in?
Your question is a perfect setup for an action item that is coming soon and needs to happen. The Supreme Court right now is considering whether Title VII, its ban on sex discrimination, already includes sexual orientation and gender identity. So, here's the good news. We hope the Supreme Court's going to rule our way. The bad thing is, if we win, there's going to be a push on Congress to actually add those words, to fix what the Supreme Court did wrong. That decision probably won't be at the end of June. It'll probably be in April. So watch for the Harris decision and be prepared to hit, especially the wobbly Republican men, and tell them, don't add sexual orientation and gender identity to Title VII.
Okay, will there be an organized campaign by somebody that they could, on this stage, that they could all tap into and be part of?
Well, we're always sending emails out
On this
through
Harris
Eagle
decision?
Forum,
Okay.
anytime any of these sex issues come up in front of Congress. I mean, for us, it's always an alert to contact on it.
Okay, so sign up for Eagle Forum's alerts as well. Anybody else? How do you push out this kind of information quickly so it can be used by your warriors in this room?
We have a weekly email that goes out that summarizes what we've done for that week, and we have all kinds of information on specifically the Harris case. We rallied in front of the Supreme Court, and we've been lobbying. We have talking points and lobbying material on the Equality Act. So just come to our website, concernedwomen.org, and sign up for our weekly updates, and then you can sort of search in there for any other information you want.
Hadley, do you have any kind of alerts or information?
Yes. I'll just add, Independent Women's Law Center did file an amicus brief in Harris Funeral Homes. I'm sure we'll be monitoring the outcome of that case. And if there is an effort, as Greg says, to add SOGI to Title VII, we would oppose that. Independent Women's Voice would take action on that. So you can visit IWV.org, Independent Women's Voice, and IWF.org. You can sign up. We have a weekly capsule email from IWF that sort of summarizes our content and action alerts.
Okay.
Can I add something more?
Yeah.
I think what's important to remember when you discuss SOGI is because, and I think some of the other ladies talked about how, women say, oh, well, we got to be nice to it. We just want to be nice. Is that these are things that will harm women.
Right.
And you never stop talking about
That's
the
right.
harms to women in every single conversation.
Very good.
That's a good
Very
word.
important. So we have several, let me just say, we have several about getting aware. So when your guys are voting, you're only going to get to pick 3. So what we want to capsulize maybe together, Anna, condense is sign up for everybody's emails and be aware and alert and get the information. And then somebody else had a question?
We're reaching the saints here. How do we reach what was the other one?
The mushy middle.
The savables.
Savables.
Yes.
How do we reach the savables that aren't going to your websites? What else can we do?
Op-eds, media hits.
Video.
I think we're all doing them, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got it. You can. The mainstream media is not going to ever cooperate with us.
I mean, a lot of it
and we
you
don't
can
have
do
enough
is
money
show
for
video.
You know what, and in a
ads.
minute, I actually want to put something up, if we could, for a second. Josh, do you have those slide? This is a learning moment for us when you talk about the mainstream media. Okay, this is the front page of the Washington Post last month on a Sunday. Now, I've circled in red. The big news of the day was historic rise for women in the U.S. workforce. It was the first time in history that people who were paid wages, women outweighed men. Front page. Okay, so the economics editor of the Washington Post obviously thought that deserved to be on the front page. So whomever that person is won that battle. But because the Washington Post has an agenda, what do? Look in the middle. Now we'll go to the next slide. Fear of Trump win freezes Iowans. And look at the picture. It's all women living in fear of Donald Trump. They're crying because they're frozen because they're fearful of Donald Trump, the guy who just created the historic rise for women in the U.S. workforce. So then you go to the next slide. Pelosi ready to give Senate articles of impeachment on the president who just delivered for women the historic rise for women in the U.S. workforce. So just as we looked at the slides in the main session for clues about what they're up to, read your newspapers critically. This is all very deliberate. The positioning of everything, they had to report on the economy, but they took the visual, and then my goodness, what is Nancy Pelosi? I mean, this shows they're not for women. Because she's ready to impeach him, even though he's doing this work for women that no other president could have ever done. Okay, so just critical thinking, and then we'll go to the next question.
Can I comment
you have a quick comment?
on another bit of it? You know, what the argument that's always done for why we need these types of laws is because women have an unfair shake, that there is a wage gap, and that women are being sexually harassed. The other thing to keep in mind is that these laws will not give any woman a pay raise and will not stop any man from sexually harassing women. I mean, it's not, these are laws that they're trying, in other words, they won't have the solution to the problem that they think that exists. And that goes to Hadley's point, which is, you know, they propose this solution, but it's a solution that won't work. And I think you have to hit on the fact that women are, I mean, I know it's a hard thing to get into the statistics of it, but there is no such thing as a pay gap.
Yep. Not. Okay, next. And if you have an action step in your question, that's good too.
Yeah, I do. Janet Morana, Priest for Life, and co-founded Selling More. I want to talk just for a second about those 8 Republicans who you said, you know, didn't vote the right way. Obviously, we want to see them reelected because we want to take back the House. So you can't, unless they had primaries where there was a better person running, which I think that train probably left the station already. So you've got these 8 people that went the wrong way. I think perhaps, you know, a panel like we're having here, do you do visits like meeting as a panel? You know, you can stage events, as you know, up on the Hill and invite members to come and their staffers. So maybe they need a little more education and like a direct visit. And especially within your groups, like now that I know this, I'll be telling my people that are in their states to tell them, hey, we heard about your vote, and guess what? We're not happy about that, and we want to come to your office and educate you. So I think we have to get our people to go to their hometown offices in their state and say to them, we're gonna probably vote for you because we want to take back the House, but guess what, sucker? If you don't get in line, and you don't vote down that ERA, this is the last time you'll ever get our vote ever again.
Okay,
I
so
think we have to like have a little more harder approach with them.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
it
an
works. We
excellent
just did it
point.
with a state rep in Virginia, like one of the Republicans who betrayed us, who we helped with our 501c4 door knocked and then voted for ERA.
Yeah.
We made a very uncomfortable conversation. So you just bring in like a group of people. We brought in like 10 students, and we said we want the
So
reasons why.
if I could just summarize that, and we'll go
I
on
think that could be
to
an
the
action
next.
segment for all the groups.
Yeah.
You can target, because, you know, that's what
Yes.
with our list, Priests for Life, we target, like before a primary, before thing, we go into like that, all our people, and we send them messaging.
Yeah, so the action step here is, if you have a sphere of influence and a group of people, whether it's your church, no matter what it is, when you ask a congressman or senator what are they most afraid of, people showing up at their home office. And we have to get better of that. And when you ask them how many people, 3 or 4,
Isn't that big?
on an issue, imagine if all of the groups and all of you, we did a systematic, coordinated approach to local offices. Washington's important, but they're really worried about the local offices. So that would be an action step, not just local involvement with local congressional offices, but coordinated efforts by the people in this room and on this stage to coordinate a systematic approach to that. Okay, who else had a question or thought? We're going to have to move on, I'm sorry, to another person. So sorry.
Well, I have a couple of things I thought. I mean, if you wanted to do something with the House and the Senate, you could do a WIMP list.
I'm sorry, a what?
A WIMP list.
Oh.
Believe it or not, it would go around social media like you wouldn't be crazy. But the other thing is that I'm wondering a little bit about, to me, there's a little, and you got to understand I'm older, a double message. We're trying to preserve babies, but we're telling every woman they can have a career constantly and choose. And they can't choose, but, you know, they choose one or the other. What is wrong with choosing a child over a career? After my kids are raised, I still have another 40 years of career time. I mean, I don't ever lose a career because of children. So there's kind of a little bit of a double message, I think, which I feel like, I will tell you this, because of personal experience, that when you choose life and somebody says that you can kill it and it's okay, it's a spirit of violence against the minds of women. Because that shouldn't have to be a choice that they get to make. All society, when they say we have life, then when they get pregnant, it's just a matter of what they're going to do, if they want to keep the baby or have somebody else adopt it. But I think the fact that nobody brings out the fact of the spirit of violence, and really abortion is a spirit of death. We need to fight this with the spirit of death. We need to talk about the spirit of violence of having to even make the decision. Because pretty much I've counseled these people. And most, I will say this, 80% of the girls that get abortions is because the boyfriend wanted it, or the parents were going to be shamed over it. They didn't want it. They did it because they were trying to please someone else.
So
or they had that fear. So the action, I think we need to bring out the violence of the mental violence. We also need to bring out the fact that, one, we're going to overturn this. We got to start preparing for all the girls to help them when they're pregnant.
I would use the word reverse. I don't use the word overturn on messaging, just FYI. Just put reverse in there, not overturn.
But the mental violence and that it's a violent act, I love it, and it's not really, you're not
Abortion is
choosing
violence
between
works.
one or two for the rest of your life.
The violence rhetoric works. We use it on campuses. We have a whole tour.
Does anybody else have a thought on that?
Everyone's anti-violence. I would say, and to your point about talking about mothers who work, that's something that we talk. I do a talk on the lies that feminists tell of you can have it all, and quite honestly, you can't have it all, and you can attempt to have it all, and you will fall short, and it will be a constant battle that you have. But that is why we are making sure that no woman feels discriminated, that she feels supported. That's why we are for a conservative paid family leave or whatever it might be, that making those options for her to be able to work part-time or telecommute, or because unfortunately in some reality we have to be careful about talking about that, because she's like, what are you talking about? I have to work. Both of us always have to work. So I think we can be real in our stories that we share of working women saying, this, we do it, we try, but it's never going to be perfect. And here are some things that might make it easier.
And who else has the next question?
Right.
Yes,
Right, there
you
you
can
go.
have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time.
There you go.
Or you will do nothing well. Okay, Donna has a question.
Well, I have a couple of comments and then...
And if you could keep it, to 1 minute or so, because we have a lot of people. Sorry,
right.
Donna.
So there is a winning issue that attracts people of all parties and every parent, and that is protecting the dignity and the safety of children once they're born from sexual exploitation. We have a pandemic, 45 million images of child pornography out there, double over last year, mostly infants and toddlers. Children are one of the largest consumers of hardcore pornography. 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused, and I can go on and on and on. But I will tell you this, and this would be my recommended action step.
Great.
That we spend as much time protecting the innocence and the safety of children once they are born as we do in getting them out of the womb. And this has been bipartisan. We've got a Children's Internet Safety Presidential Pledge that Trump signed. Hillary heard about it, she got on board. We've got a governor's pledge that is bipartisan and an AG's pledge. And I think that this is one of the ways that we can get those women in the middle to come to our side, because we start talking about this, and this president has been the most proactive on this issue of any president.
He really has. It's been amazing, and that's part because of your work, Donna, so thank you for that. Who else has an action step that's different? I see 2 hands raised here. Okay, there's somebody has a mic in 1 minute or less, please.
Oh, most definitely, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Just how do we do more and better storytelling about the very real harms to real women? Because I've noticed that, my friends in the middle, including women, just do not believe that the types of incidents that y'all have been referring to in bathrooms, et cetera, actually do happen in the real world.
So what I'm going to recommend is action step, because that's a whole day's conversation. How do you do good storytelling? Is that in the future, CNP, have our Hollywood scriptwriter experts talk about good storytelling. But that could be an action step, is talk about how to do good stories.
One action step, I would say, read Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind.
Yeah.
Because all of us think one way and they think another, and until you understand how they think, you're never going to be able to talk.
We just put out talking points on what's happening on the pediatric level for transgender.
That'd be awesome.
We have that available, and it's stories, and we have it all annotated.
Okay, this is something we haven't really talked about, although I think all of us would agree that this is probably super important, and that is bathing all of these efforts in prayer. And so I know each one of your organizations probably have prayer things that you are doing. And so are those things that we can go online to your organization so that we can be praying for you? Or are those things that you need to organize prayer covering for your efforts?
Amen.
Because if it's not being covered by prayer, we're acting in the flesh, and only God's going to take this battle down.
Amen. Yes.
That's right.
So I know that there's prayer action alerts that you send out.
Yes,
Penny,
we send out
do you send out any?
we've asked everyone to pray at noon.
Yeah.
Everyone set on their calendar prayer at noon. Our whole office has it. We've asked our field together as a nation to pray, whatever time zone you're in, to pray for our nation. Pray for these issues.
Students for Life has a prayer team, so you can email me. I'll put you on.
So we
the list.
keep asking questions, and you know what's so awesome about it? They have all the answers. So if you've got to be on their email list and their prayer alerts to get all the ammunition you need. Somebody else has the microphone? I'm letting the microphone guys choose the question askers, okay? So wave them down. Uh-oh. So real quick, what would be your action step?
So I went to an all-women's college, and the way that the activists message on those campuses are they bring people with stories. So it's back to the storytelling, but they're bringing them to your face. They're saying, how could you discriminate against this person right next to you? So what are you guys doing to bring women or anyone? I know you listed a bunch of cases. Jack Phillips is super famous because you messaged him out. How are we messaging more people out who will go out and actually show their face to people?
We did a video. One of our fellows, Kelsey Bowler, did a video about the young women athletes in Connecticut and interviewed a couple of them. And so that's one where after I watched that video, I was like, wow, how could anyone say to this young track athlete that you don't deserve to compete? But what was interesting about this point about storytelling is that there were more female athletes who didn't want to be on camera, and they had us change their voice. Because they're scared into silence. It's very unfortunate. But we also did a project a few years ago about people who had their insurance canceled as a result of the Affordable Care Act. Incidentally, I was one of those people. I got a cancellation letter. But, you know, there's power in numbers. And when people started to come out and say, hey, this happened to me. Hey, this happened to you too? You know, then we had, you know, hundreds of thousands of people getting on our social media accounts and really using the hashtag and making a movement out of it. So I think in terms of encouraging people to sort of come out of the silence and share their stories, that goes to my point earlier about making it more socially acceptable for women and for men to say, this is what I believe, and this is what's right, and this is what's wrong. It's wrong to take those opportunities.
So I hate to say we don't have any more time for Q&A, but what we're supposed to do now as a group is look at the screen. If you see that you need to add an action step, you're just going to stand up and all you're going to say is, here's a suggested action step. So we're going to do that for a few minutes. Who has a new suggested action step only, please? We're going to go rapid fire.
Tiny point of clarification on messaging would be Equality Act and Equal Rights Amendment, ERA and EA, sound a lot alike.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
And Catherine's talking about storytelling. We don't think we have that on the
I think we added that. We're going to talk in the future about have Hollywood scriptwriters teach us all how to do better storytellers. I'd like to add one on there, and one is, here's why we don't need the Equal Rights Amendment. We know why it's bad now, but a lot of young people say, well, aren't you for equal pay, equal work? Women currently have every right under the law that men have. There's the Equal Pay Act of 1963. There's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Workplace discrimination is illegal based on your sex. We have every protection under the law, and we need to teach our young people to say that. Therefore, there is no need for an ERA. Very important.
I have an action step. I would say teaching, but because we have Title IX, we have the Employee Non-Discrimination Act. Like, we have Students for Life has a campus pregnant parenting student bill of rights, because we're seeing all these kids being discriminated against, and the school is doing it.
And so what is the action step?
I think we need to get, if we're involved with Christian universities, if we're alumni or donating to universities, I would ask, who are your Title IX coordinators on these campuses?
Okay.
Meet with them and see, are you actually upholding Title IX? How are you promoting Title IX rights? Because most campuses, that coordinator has like 6 jobs, and nobody knows what.
What about
that
the
is.
the Pregnancy Discrimination Act?
Right.
Can that be applied to colleges?
We'd have to ask.
Because we have.
I see a gentleman back there with we're going to have to keep going real fast. These are deep issues. Who else has an action step to add?
That's for employment.
Yeah, I think it's,
The
ERA would be bad for men.
Yes, ERA would be bad for men, and I have this in my closing remarks. I'm going to address the men part of this too. Okay.
Because I know I grew up in an Italian family. My mother expected more of my sisters. I enjoyed being a little lazier, and I enjoyed being a male. And I do believe that act would be bad for me. So it's a selfish thing.
Okay. Amen. Who else has an action step or something we should take off? You have an action step? You're being drafted.
Yeah, all I was going to say was I think that many people who are young women, they may be very open to the ERA because they think that somehow there's unfairness. It's kind of embellished on your point. But I just say all the ERA is pro-abortion. That is all it is.
That's a great.
It's not anything you have every right men have. You already have these.
Yes.
So all is pro-abortion. And if you're pro-abortion, that's a different question. Then that on the Constitution. Make the Constitutional Amendment say abortion is legal forever.
Okay.
Everything
Clarifying the
related to
connection. Okay.
Yeah, that's just call it everything related to
everything related to abortion. That's what we say.
Well, but it is
the
much
only
more
thing
than
it's all about.
abortion.
Yes, it is, but it is that too. Okay, next, who's got an action step?
This would demand more explanation that I could give to the leaders here, but you mentioned the idea of more collaboration among these groups here, and there's something called Strategy 3, which is used in the pro-life movement very successfully to get a variety of groups together to decide what strategy could they do together that they couldn't do separately. So I could explain how that goes at some other point, but I'd like to suggest it for this group.
It's called Strategy 3. Is that a website?
No,
there's, and I don't think there's, I was looking on my phone, I don't think there's an easy way to give you the information.
So if
But
people
it's been very
Googled,
successful.
if people,
If you Google it, you'll get a lot of other strategies.
Yeah,
that are
don't.
Not what you want.
There's worksheets, I think.
Yeah, that I could provide to you. But there's been great success in determining certain talking points, issues, stories that we're going to hear over and over and over again, not myriads of stories that we don't understand, but key things that we could all adopt in our messaging.
Okay, and so to that point, and for all of you who have other tools that we need to know about, CFNP, Council for National Policy website, and we also send out a 5-minute report, and they also send out a member spotlight. If you have a tool like that, you call the CNP office, and they'll include it in their newsletters for everybody. Okay, because we don't have all the answers. You guys have answers. That's why we're all together here. And you need to be bold about sharing your information with the email list. You have access to the email list yourself. So you don't have to wait for us to do something. Hadley, you wanted to say something?
I have a couple action items, if I may. I mentioned earlier about the mismatch between the problems and the solutions. Sometimes it's talking about the problem differently. Sometimes it's proposing a better solution. And that's what we have done with a few specific pieces of legislation. We have a paid family leave proposal. It's called Earned Leave. You can visit our website and learn more about it. Senators Rubio and Romney have put it into legislation. We have a better version of the Violence Against Women Act that we've been advocating for with Senator Joni Ernst. So I encourage you all to contact your senators and tell them that you favor these pieces of legislation over the very bad, clunky solutions from the left, because we also believe if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we're trying to come to the table and come with the best solutions that are conservative principles in law that are really targeting a solution at people who need it most rather than a big government one-size-fits-all solution. And then finally, I just wanted to say, I mentioned our communications kits, and an action step for this audience might be going online and getting those communication kits. You can visit iwf.org, should be under publications. You can find messaging kits there. We have them in a variety of issue areas. If any of them are password protected, you can type in IWF_, and then the password is whatever the topic is. So it could be paid leave or healthcare or immigration, but those are all for your use. And Linda asked a very important question earlier about methods for changing minds. Our method, and Kristan sort of described this when it came to fetal heartbeat, is getting to the hurdles that people face before they even consider supporting our legislation, our idea, or our candidate. Sometimes people have swallowed a falsehood. And if we can help debunk that falsehood, that frees them up to agree with us. So a lot of our approach in these communication kits is to do misperception versus fact. And we address the many misperceptions about our perspective on a variety of issues and give the real facts to help break down those misperceptions.
Okay, and Greg, you had something to add?
2 quick things. Don't forget states and localities. They enact SOGIs.
Yes, they do.
If we focus all of our attention on Congress, we're missing it. 22 states already have them, over 200 municipalities. Virginia's about to pass a SOGI. And we did too little too late. We cannot let that happen again. Number 2, be prepared to litigate. Be prepared to litigate. Test case, proactive litigation. Picking a fight that doesn't come to you. You or your friends, your sphere of influence, we're going to need plaintiffs to challenge these things when they become realities. Thanks.
And they can call, if they have a lawsuit to look into, Alliance Defending Freedom.
1-800-TEL-ADF.
Or Kelly Shackelford.
Pardon? Yes. I can provide
and
it.
You can contact him for that list. Okay? Yes.
This goes along with what Hadley was just saying, I think, but I think it's an
There's a mic there. Okay,
We can
got
get
it.
to that.
Okay, so we're gonna let each one of you just say like 30 seconds of closing statements, and then we're gonna have to go into the voting, and I've got to explain that. So any last thought? Please keep it short. Greg, I'm just gonna go down the line. Any last thoughts, Greg?
Communicate with Republican senators about SOGIs. They matter. The House is going to do what it does because it's controlled by Democrats. The people who we really need to hit are Republicans in the Senate. Tell them not to support SOGIs and explain why.
Okay.
I think it's really important not to get caught in using the word gender or gender identity as they talk about with SOGI. It's sexual. Use the word sex or sexual because that drives home exactly what we're talking about, and gender is too mushy a word.
Good.
We didn't talk about healthcare, but Hadley mentioned this is a big thing for winning women. And we talked about telling stories, but it didn't really make it too much in there. We need to tell our stories now before Medicare for All becomes a thing, and we can win women with that. Last weekend, there was a report called ICER that came out, an unelected body that deems fit to tell everybody if drugs are worth the cost. A drug that was just approved by the FDA for my children with cystic fibrosis that we believe may add a decade of life. ICER told the world that that drug at $360,000 a year was too expensive. And even if it was a full cure, it's still too expensive for people who have CF. This is death panel math. They use a word called QALY. You all know somebody in your life who has an expensive medical illness or need. You all need to start talking about their stories when you're talking to, especially women, about health care, Medicare for all in this election season.
Great.
We should be able
Hadley?
to choose.
Go ahead. We're running out of time fast.
Right. I guess in closing, I would just say if you're here, I know you're already part of the Army and you're ready for battle. So just thank you and keep up what you're doing, and think of your friends who are like-minded, who are not in this room, who could also join the Army and write letters to the editor of your local paper or contact their members, their senators, their state houses, their governors with some of these action steps, because it really does, every voice that we can add to what we're doing really matters. So thank you for being here, and thank you for taking these action steps.
Penny?
Prepare and be informed, and then engage, and certainly pray. And and the way you prepare is to sign up for and go look for information and be ready for that conversation you're going to have. And I love what Cassie reminded us of. The stories are important. Get on social media if you're not. Engage in that. Get other people's stories out there.
Great. So you guys, you have an action step right now. If you have your phone with you or a computer, we want you to go to cfnp.org/women, because you're going to vote on the top 3 action steps. I'm going to be the first to say we have not fine-tuned this process because we have like 20 action steps for you to work through, and we're supposed to pick the top 3. That's pretty impossible. So I'm going to ask you to vote for one of them that says sign up for everybody's list, okay? That's supposed to be in there somewhere, is to sign up for the list. But you have a couple minutes to do that. Again, that website is CFNP, that stands for Counsel for National Policy, cfnp.org/women. And there's an update. You're going to pick your top 3 action steps. And while we're closing this, they're going to be able to pull up a bar graph, right, and show you how people are voting. So Anna's going to do that. While you're voting, I just want to thank all of you for attending today. I don't have a lot of people voting yet because I know you don't all have devices here. But just keep reading through the list. And those who aren't voting or who have voted, I just want to address the issue of men. One of the awful things that's happened in American society is how badly we treat the male in America. I have 2 sons. I remember one of them flipped on the television when he was in high school for a minute, and the commercial was Dad looks bad, Dad looks stupid. How did we come to a place in this country where a man cannot defend the life of his child from murder? So this is probably another whole big topic we can cover sometime, is how do we give men a greater voice to say they can speak into the abortion issue, because they're there children. And until we're willing to do that, it will always be positioned as a man against woman fight where men have no voice. So that's a whole nother issue. I didn't want to just say it goes very noticed by everybody on this stage. And that could be the key that we've never tapped into that could actually help us win sometime, is giving back men their God-given role that God designed. And so I look forward to exploring that. Look at all the people voting. Continue to vote. We have 1 more minute for you to vote. And then the top 3 will be compiled and put up on the screen tonight or Saturday night, I guess it is. That is today, Saturday. That makes me sad. I want to stay longer. So tonight they'll be on the screen, the top 3 action steps. But while you're voting, there's 50 more seconds for us to end and be done here. Thank you for coming. All you women, thank you for your fight. Hopefully we'll be able to do more of this in the future for CNP, because I think we've uncovered a lot of important issues we have to dig down in. And Jeremy, the suggestion for storytelling, Jerome, is awesome.
Here, Rebecca, can I jump in on storytelling?
Yep.
Just in your speaking to your friends about the ERA, if you say, if you pass this, you'll have no way to protect women in domestic violence shelters. It's a story in their head.
A story in their head, yes.
If you pass this, you have no way to protect women in prisons. I mean, the idea that it's a picture in their head, it's one or the other. You can't have ERA and that.
I would hope that you could put some of these story ideas and send them to the office, and they could be distributed to us. So, okay, we have 5 seconds left to give our action steps, our voting. Oh, wait, I just got more time on the clock, or do we have them? Oh, you're counting them. Okay, do you have the action steps, the top 3?
What are they?
Oh, so we won't, okay, what are they? Have a future CNT topic, great.
Okay, college students. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. That's an easy one. Encourage people to come out of silence.
They'll be clarified tonight, right? Okay, great. So thank you for coming.
Thank
you
you for
guys are
voting for
awesome, and we appreciate you very much.